How's everybody's day anyway? All good?
Yeah, all good,
Emily?
thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
How's everyone getting on at the moment? So far, so good.
yeah, I think it's great. Sorry, Stacey, if you want to talk before me, because I can talk. I just think it's really good to be accountable. I work with ladies who are accountable to me and vice versa. I think it's great to be accountable. It just keeps you on track. I don't know how you find it, Stacey. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the app's really good. I think I've used like my Fitness Pal and stuff before for tracking, but I think the fact that you're putting your pictures on and you're tracking, and then you're getting immediate feedback. I mean, Sandra's constantly commenting on food, and which is great, and she does really challenge your way of thinking about things as well, which I think is great. So yeah, I've never had that level of support before, so I think yeah. It's
No, I totally agree. I totally agree about Sandra. I said to Jack yesterday when I spoke to him, she's brilliant because she can get things out of you that in a very, 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 very good way. In terms of your eating patterns, are you having enough? Are you having too little? And she does it really, really well. So credit to you, Jack. She is.
I don't know. I'm employed well. No, but I think in fairness, I think what she's really good at, I think I was speaking to you about that, Lisa, yesterday, is that she's a very good, she gets, like you say, it's all about mindset for her. And it's very much, she's a great coach and like asking the questions rather than telling you what to do and getting you to think. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that's what this is about. It's about kind of finding what you want to do. Right then, I'm going to get started. So again, I'll record this. I'll pop it into the school app if people do need to go. But what we're going to talk about today is protein. Now, I don't want to be make it too much of a lecture, but there are a few things I did want to go through. But throughout this as well, I will ask if you've got any questions. So feel free to jump in. But don't keep jumping in because we've only got half an hour. So how have we got on in week one, just in terms of kind of focusing on calories? Are we finding we're managing to stick to them? How are you finding that?
Yeah, Stacey, do you want to go first?
yeah, I mean, calorie wise, I'm finding it okay. I mean, I've always done really low calorie diets, and like probably two low calorie diets in the past. So calorie wise, I've been fine. It's been different. Having more protein, that's what I've found, that I'm having to think about more how to get the protein in. But kind of as we talked about yesterday, Jack, in the session, that protein puddings and putting protein in your yogurt and stuff is like a helpful way when you get to the end of the day and you think I haven't quite reached my protein goal. So kind of a good way to get to it. So yeah, but I'm definitely, I
Absolutely.
mean, I'm full despite being on the lower calories.
And that's it, really. I think when it comes to calories as well, it's thing is they're not arbitrary. Obviously, they're based on you, but we need to start thinking about how you feel as well. So if you're not hungry, feel free to eat a little bit less. But likewise, if you do a bit more activity, the following day you're probably going to be hungry. Again, menstrual cycle, that's going to affect it as well. So just those things to consider. But again, this is what this next 6 weeks is for, is really just to understand from how much you're eating and how much it affects you. Now, once we do start getting to grips with that, then we can start thinking of the macros. And what I want to talk about today is one of those, which is protein. Now, these are the steps that we're going to be taking really. So step one is overall energy balance or calories. And this really does dictate weight loss, weight gain, maintenance. So once we get that, this needs to be the focus. However, once we begin to get to grips with that, that's when we can start thinking about protein. So this is what I'm going to be talking about today, is how much you should be having, what should we be having, how to split it up. And then any questions that you've got, you can kind of throw them at me at the end. So I won't go through this bit for too long, but when we talk about macronutrients, this is just basically kind of the main food groups, and these are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And again, I will be going through the carbohydrates and fat next week, but today we're just going to be focusing on protein. Now, just in terms of kind of what protein is, okay, kind of we really just use it to help us build muscle, okay, to repair, but it's more than just that. It's almost we use amino acids for so many different functions in the body, and it's really there for like immunity, for health, and it's critical as well for body composition. And this is the reason why when I talk about body composition is keeping muscle mass and losing fat, especially in a calorie deficit. We know that slightly higher protein diets are very effective. One for kind of maintaining weight loss, but also to help with satiety as well, or helping you keeping you full. So just in terms of sources, I don't want to teach to I don't want to make you suck eggs, but can you just give me some protein sources that you're having at the moment? Like back at school.
Fish, salmon, yogurts, chicken, eggs.
Tick, 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 tick. I think we know these now. So really the way that I like to categorize them, again, I'll send you a copy of this if you wanted it, is that I look at kind of very lean sources, which are lower fat, lower calorie, lean protein, again, slightly more fat, and also more like fatty protein. And this will determine, well, there's nothing wrong with fattier protein. It's just that you need to account for it. So if you are going to be tracking, that's the easiest way. Or if you're not going to track, it's just making sure that when you have a fatty cut of fish like mackerel or salmon, or you're going to use, say, like cheese, for example, use that as your fat portion too. And again, when we start moving away from the tracking, an easy way to build your meals is one portion of protein, one portion of carbs, one portion of fat. If you've got that one portion of fat, you know that you don't need to have any more. And that's kind of where we're looking to work towards as well. But the key thing here is really to kind of focus on the leaner sources if the goal is fat loss. However, if you're tracking, it's not going to matter too much. And have you got any questions about kind of sources of protein at all? Are we all fairly confident with that? Thumbs up. Excellent. Brilliant. Okay, so in terms of how much, obviously I've set this for you, but sometimes it's quite good to get an understanding of this because you'll hear lots of people telling you different things. And I just wanted to get you to understand why I've set them this way. And if you had any questions about this, you can just ask me. So when it comes to protein, it really comes down to kind of how big you are, okay, and also kind of activity. And what we typically do is we aim for around about 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight per day. And this is based on weight, or more specifically, target body weight. So I'm sure if you've had a personal trainer before, well, not all personal trainers, I'm not just categorizing everyone like that, but they might have said 2 grams per kilo of body weight. Now, the issue with this is that fat mass doesn't require protein, okay? We focus really on fat-free mass. So I think muscle mass, where we really need to do it. So if you can get a fairly accurate body fat scan done, you want to use fat-free mass. Or if you've had the in-body done, which all of you have, the target body weight, that's what we'd use as well, okay? So what we just need to think about is that's the kind of total we're aiming for. Obviously, you've got yours. But normally for ladies, we're looking for around about 75 to 120 grams of protein per day. Is anyone's outside of that? Are we all around that target?
I can be very much outside of that, but I've always had quite a high protein diet, especially for the last 2 years. And I'm aware that I'm probably a little too high, so I'm bringing that down gradually. But it's quite hard because a lot of my favourite foods are very protein dense.
And there's not really much of a problem with that because when we start looking at body composition or bodybuilders, we know that we can go for that 2.5 to even 3 grams per kilo of fat-free mass. So again, this guy here today, 66 kilos of fat-free mass times by 3. It's quite a lot of 210 grams of protein. So you can see that you can definitely go very high. And in terms of I'll go through the negatives shortly, but ultimately we want enough to keep protein to muscle mass, and also, well, I'll go into this now actually. Yeah, go back a bit. So we need enough to keep, so total's the most important thing. So if you can get your totals right, however you really split that up, it's not going to make a huge difference. So this is the reason why, to begin with, just try and stay within 10% of that total, okay? Try not to worry about distribution. Now, if you really did want a little bit of extra credit, can you see that okay? Or do you want me to zoom in? Good, thumbs up.
That's fine. That was on your Instagram today, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, this is kind of, I used it. So really, if we wanted to try and get very specific, we want about 3 to 4 servings of around 0.25 to 0.3 grams per kilo of target body weight per day. Now, the reason why we have to have it fairly regularly is that apologies for the jargon, something called protein synthesis is basically a process which keeps muscle and builds new muscle. And it's a constant kind of turning over of new proteins. And what happens is every 3 to 4 hours, this process starts to wane and to drop. And the reason why I want to try and keep it up is this keeps muscle mass. And we know how important this is because more muscle mass equals more calorie burns. It means you can eat more carbohydrates because that's where carbohydrates are stored. So, and when we're in a deficit, you are going to lose muscle mass. There's a good chance. So we really need to do what we can to optimize keeping muscle. And one of the easiest ways to do this is eat fairly regularly. So every 3 to 4 hours, ideally, we do want a protein portion. Okay, so to keep it really simple, if you're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's going to be your 3 protein portions per day. And out of the girls here, would you say that you're doing that? Do you think you are getting protein with most meals?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So keep doing it, really important. Okay. Now, the next thing as well is eating after exercise. So this is more to do with people who do fairly intense exercise. However, for us now, most of us are doing it, which is great. We're looking for a little bit more protein after exercise. And again, if you wanted to get really technical, so just times your target body weight. So again, for this guy, it was 78, so 78 times 0.4, and that will give the amount of protein that you need to have after the exercise. But if I was you, if you just focus on those 3 main meals and a snack, we know that we're going to hit the targets that we need. And next up is eating before bed. And again, you don't have to do this, but what we know is because we're going to be fasting for a long amount of time, having quite a big bolus of protein can really help. And again, it can elevate this protein synthesis a little bit higher. So we're not going to need as much, we're not going to need any in the night. So sometimes it's quite a good idea just to get another protein snack. So Stacey, you said about having a protein pudding, really good idea. Again, something like Greek yogurt with some whey protein. It's an easy way to get kind of a large fix of this protein. Now, the reason why we say the 0.25 to 0.3 grams per kilo is because we need around about that kind of 20 to 30 grams to hit this kind of level where we can stimulate this new build a new muscle mass. The issue is as we start getting a little bit older, so we know that for people kind of like mid-50s, late 50s and older, we need more protein per serving to stimulate this process of building muscle mass. So for those of us who are starting getting into our 50s, we actually need a bit more than say that 20 to 30 grams and maybe even up to 40 grams per serving. And this is quite difficult for a lot. Again, I remember speaking to my parents about and it's very difficult for, say, a generation where you're used to having something like porridge for breakfast or cereal, like a pasta dish in the evening with not as much protein. To try and hit 40 grams per serving can be quite challenging, but something to be aware of as a few of us are getting a little bit older, not including me.
I'm saying nothing.
Yeah. So is everyone, do you think, are we okay about kind of when and how much we need to be eating with our protein?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question, Jack. You know, in terms of your body can only ingest so much in one sitting, can't it? So the rest of it is just maybe a waste. Is that right?
Well, actually, there's a this is the great thing about science. It's constantly evolving. There's a really like groundbreaking study that came out in, I think it was December last year, which showed you could have up to 100 grams of protein and it would have a drip feeding effect throughout the day. So
Ooh,
what we used to think is, again, we need the 20 grams to stimulate this process, or 40 grams when you're a bit older. However, you can actually have a lot more, and it'll just have a drip feeding effect throughout the day. So it doesn't matter too much if you have much more.
okay,
And
really.
I'll go on to that next point in a minute about you can't really store protein, and that's almost a good thing when it comes to body fat. So again, just about how you would distribute this. So you would all have had a table like this. It doesn't really matter kind of again how you do this, depending on how many meals you have, but this is kind of how it should look. Okay, so you can see here you've got a fairly good balance of kind of protein throughout the day, and you might have 1 or 2 snacks, which is a little bit less. But just try and think about if we can understand what that 30 grams looks like, what the 20 grams looks like, or what the 40 grams looks like of protein, it's going to make it really easy. Right then. Okay, so how do we actually increase our protein portions? Let me just move that to the top. Right. Okay, so really, does everyone find it quite easy to hit their protein targets here?
Yeah.
Not initially, but I think now I've been doing it for a few weeks. You kind of learn, don't you? Like particularly, I found breakfast really challenging.
Yeah.
Although part of that is because I don't really eat breakfast, or I didn't previously eat breakfast. But actually, just things like the whey protein in the yogurt has kind of really helped bump that up for breakfast.
So I think this is definitely something where people usually struggle, and it's just trying to keep it as logical as we can. And the easiest way to do that is just increase the protein portion. And once we know what that, say, 30 grams of protein looks like, so whether it's the 150 grams of Greek yogurt, it's the, say, 100 grams of, say, chicken breast, it becomes quite easy. And it's always just about having that little bit more. So that should always be your first port of call. And again, protein-rich snacks, things like your eggs, edamame beans, things like this here. Again, the skyr, the yogurt that you mentioned, really, really easy. And something like protein powder as well. Even though we don't want to rely on that, it's just a simple, convenient, cost-effective way to bump up those protein targets. And again, we've already mentioned this before, but Greek yogurt, skyr, they're such good sources. Again, I'm making flatbreads tonight, and it's just kind of Greek yogurt. You add it to kind of flour, another way just to kind of bump up that protein. So it's such a useful ingredient. And another one as well is egg whites, is that you can get like the Happy Chick egg whites. I think, is it Aldi or Lidl do something similar now, where adding, say, something like to oats, when you cook, say, porridge, is a great way to get another 15 grams. And also just things like adding extra to omelette. I actually don't really like the idea of the liquid egg whites. There's just something not nice about it. But in terms of kind of bringing up protein content, absolutely fine. So think about those main key areas, strategies to do that, and just have a look at some of the protein portions that are on the school as well.
Yeah,
Right then, okay, so
add egg whites to porridge, did you say then?
yeah.
Oh God, I've never done that. So would you put it in when it's all raw and then cook it all together?
So,
Oh, I might try that.
So that's what because I don't have protein powder anymore. So I'll just put an egg in there, and then just gonna whisk it up, and I'll just cook it, and I'll just put a little bit of honey for sweetness with some blueberries. But yeah, it works quite well,
Brilliant.
especially when people want to start moving away from powders.
Yeah.
And also the other thing as well is sometimes remember veg as well, and even say like beans, lentils, peas. These still have protein. Now they're mainly fiber and carbohydrates, but if you start adding things like peas, broccoli, they're actually a half decent, not a great source of protein because you need a hell of a lot of it, but these will help just kind of bringing it up. Now, in terms of the actual type of protein that we have, we know that animal sources, so dairy, fish, and meat, they have a high leucine content, and leucine basically is the amino acid which causes that protein synthesis we were talking about before. So often people say, oh, you need a complete protein, like we find in animal products. However, what we also know now is that if we combine vegetarian sources, so if we have, say, things like beans and rice, if we have, like, say, things like peas and beans, we can get this complete source of amino acids. So for those of you who are vegetarian, vegan even, or pescatarian, just think about having lots of different types of vegetables throughout the day. Again, this can really help with hitting those protein targets. Okay, so these are, I know it's a bit texty here, but it's quite useful to know this, is that the first one is about storing protein. You'll hear some people say, oh, you can't store protein. You can. It's converted to sugar. So it's not that we can't store it. We do get rid of a lot of it. But one of the great things about protein is it's a very inefficient fuel. And what I mean by that is that we can't really use it for energy very easily. And it has something called a high thermic effect. And basically kind of what that means is that it takes a lot of calories and a lot of energy to digest it and to absorb it. And if you can see the point that I've just highlighted here, that a lot of the energy that kind of the calories from protein are used for is actually to absorb it and to digest it. Whereas compared to, say, carbohydrates and fat, far less of those calories are used. And this is one of the reasons why high protein diets is so effective for fat loss, is that you're really not using many of the calories, or you're having to use a lot of calories to actually digest the food. And if you can see here as well with like fatty acids or dietary fat, it's very easy to store as body fat compared to anything else. So if we are going to go above our calories, really don't want to get it from fat. And this is the thing with people who go out on the weekend. If you're quite, well, if you have a lot of alcohol one evening, the next morning, keep fat very low if possible. A high protein, moderate carb, very low fat, because it's so easy to store. Is someone going to say something? Oh, okay, cool. And the last one as well is, again, I'm sure you've heard it before, kind of, is protein, is it dangerous? Is it harmful? And check with your doctor first. I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a doctor. However, what we do know in healthy people, if you haven't got any, say, pre-existing renal conditions, so kidney, anything like that, then we know that protein is absolutely fine. And you can see some of kind of these publications as well, where they do a position stand kind of into protein, and you can see up to about 2.8 grams per kilo of weight is absolutely fine. There's no real problem. So don't be worried about having the protein targets I've set, which are still far lower than this number. Okay, so just to summarize them, the main thing really is to aim for that kind of protein target that I've given you. Don't worry about these numbers here. totals matter most. Okay, so really try and focus on those to begin with. However, if you can start learning to distribute those evenly throughout the day or every 3 to 4 hours, that's really going to help keep that protein synthesis up, and it's going to help keep muscle mass, which is obviously what we need to be doing. Look for a variety. Okay, so each protein source will give you something slightly different. And the last thing as well is just remember or consider fat, because this is especially the fatty cuts of meat. So your darker meats, your fish, they are going to be higher in calorie. So just be aware of that. And the easiest way to negate that or to understand it is simply to trap. So that's everything on protein, really. I guess the floor is yours. What questions did we have, or did we have any questions about anything or Q&As about anything so far?
No, I think that's great, Jack, going through that. It's been really helpful. I mean, I do know quite a lot about protein, but there's so much out there that contradicts itself, like you've just said about the harm. I did Google once because I knew that I was on quite a high protein diet for the last 18 months, and I did Google, can it harm the kidneys? And it came up, yes, it can, yes, and I panicked. But so things like what you've just said there has reassured me that I'm fine. I'm nowhere near the amount that it could harm anyway. But you know, when you're creeping up and you think, you know, you get panicky, especially in midlife.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. And I think you've got to be careful of the sources and always just make sure it's a credible source and not just a blog. It should be some sort of
Yeah,
publication or
okay,
research.
mind blowing. So to meet somebody as knowledgeable as yourself, you've got to follow one person and believe what they say. I think because there's just
No,
so much out
don't just follow me.
to
I think
believe
it's
in.
having
Yeah,
that
come on.
open, be open. I think it's drawing your own conclusions, but try and get as much information as you can and see how
Yeah,
credible they are. But yeah,
yeah, but you know, you're a mind of information with food, and it's great. You know, it just puts your mind at rest really with the things that you can read out there. The market's
yes,
saturated with. I mean, I've noticed every supermarket you go in now, you've got things that are labelled high protein, high protein, high protein, and I think what a lot of my clients don't see is how much sugar's in some of them. So it's finding the protein sources that are quite low sugar, not no sugar, but low sugar. You know,
it's a
so
really good point you've made there, Lisa, because this is one of the biggest problems with like high protein Weetabix or protein granola. It's not really all they've done. They've got a bit more wheat protein, which is a poor source of protein.
yeah.
And then if you had, say, an extra 15 grams of Greek yogurt or one extra egg, you've got far more protein, and you're just going to have far better it's going to be easy to do that. So the marketing now is terrible. Even things like your protein bars, like your Mars protein bar, probably got as much sugar as a Mars bar and more calories. So you're probably
I don't
better off
know.
just having a slightly more
Yeah.
chicken breast and not having a normal Mars bar.
I think it's just become fashionable. The word protein has become fashionable because everybody thinks it's just going to change their body instantaneously. You know, they just think it's protein yogurt. And don't get me wrong, I've been there. I've bought protein yogurts. I know kilos as well. But when you start looking at the sugars in them, and people think, oh, I'm eating protein yogurts. That's great. So as you say, it's finding the right source of protein. I think so. That
Always remember
presentation
there's
is
that
really helpful.
continuum as well. You've got like bad and good. And it's like we don't need to be perfect. It's just kind of how close can we get to better? And there's like
Yeah,
so there's nothing wrong with a sugary yogurt as long as we're not that's the whole of your diet. Or you
yeah,
just need to start thinking about the whole perspective, I think, the diet. So
yeah.
excellent. Do you have any other questions? Now's the time. I know there's only 4 of us today.
I haven't got a question. I just thought that slide you shared on the different types of protein, like the lean protein and the more fatty protein. I hadn't really been thinking about that when I've, been choosing my protein source. So I think
Yeah.
that was a really good,
I'll
very thought provoking.
I'll share that then
Yeah,
again.
that
So I
is
think
very Stacey. Yeah, I didn't realise that either.
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I eat quite a lot of salmon, and I suppose now you've flashed it up, it's obvious that is more fatty, and therefore you just need to think about the fat that you pair with it. But I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that myself. So
Yeah,
that's
it's silly things, isn't it? And it's things like when you have dark chicken meat as well, so like the leg and obviously the tasty part, but the calories are quite a lot higher. And we're not saying it's bad, we just have to be aware. And once we begin to be aware, it makes a bit of a difference. And you're right about the salmon. It's where people have like the healthy breakfast, which are avocado and salmon and like sourdough toast, but it can be 1,000 calorie breakfast. And you think, no wonder the weight's not coming off.
yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
the dark more calorie fit, Jack.
It's
That's
fat, yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's the best bit.
I know. But if you
The
look at
underneath dog eating the turkey is the best
yeah,
bit.
if you look at chicken thigh fillets, it's quite depressing. You look at the calories for like 3 of them. It's a hell of a
Yeah.
lot, but
It'd be
tasty.
interesting to go through fat. When are you doing that, week after next? Because I can be sometimes low on fat intake, and I know that's just important to get that right as well.
Oh, no, yeah. So next week that'll be carbohydrates and fats. And I kind of
Yeah.
piece them together. And
Yeah.
I think it's people stress about those two more when really it's going to get your protein right first. And then the other two, they're inversely proportionate to one another. So if your protein carbohydrates goes high, you're going to have to keep your fat low. Whereas if you go kind of a low carb diet, your fat will naturally come up as well. It's whatever you want to choose for that. But we can go through that next week.
No, it's been really useful. Thank you for your time.
Excellent. So I'll post that. But yeah, any other questions, just make sure you keep speaking to me and obviously keep chatting to Sandra as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
So
Nice to meet
cheers,
you, Katie.
gang.
Thanks,
See
Jack. Thank you.
you later. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.